Welcome to Penn State Dickinson Law's Profiles and Leadership series. My name is Daryl Lim. I serve as the H. Leddy Bontac Chair and Associate Dean for Research and Innovation at the Law School. This series offers an unparalleled opportunity to glean insights from top leaders who serve in government, education, the private sector, and civil society. In each episode, we invite these leaders to reflect on their journeys and share skills, core values, and qualities that make them the leaders they are today. We're very pleased today to have Biegenzahn, who serves as the president at McDermott Bull and leads the firm's financial services practice. As president, he leads the strategic build-out and development of the firm's team of executive search managing directors and partners. As lead of the firm's financial services practice, he is a partner to an array of financial services firms. He's a corporate attorney by trade. He has advised his clients in mergers and acquisitions, asset-based financing, and real estate property purchase and sales transaction. He is a frequent guest lecturer on leadership and career development for the University of Michigan Ross School of Business Executive MBA program and Penn State Dickinson Law. He received his Bachelor of Arts from the University of Southern California and his Juris Doctorate from Penn State Dickinson Law. Welcome.
Thank you, Dale. Happy to be here.
So you say that the only annuity in our business is the relationship. What do you mean by that?
So when I think about the business of executive search, and to give some context, it is our firm's job and mission to partner with institutions and build out their senior leadership teams. So think from the senior vice president level up to the C-suite and board. And each search is a single transaction unto itself. And so we get hired to fill a search, a CFO, for example. We run that process, which typically takes 60 to 90 days. And when that process is complete, we stay connected to the placed candidate as well as to the client. But that search is the transaction. And so the annuity, the only piece that is the continued revenue stream, if you will, is the relationship that we build with our client throughout the process. So when they have a need, when that need arises, we're the institution that they call. And so when I think about the criticality of the relationship that's built, effectively we sell trust. And so in order to sell trust, you have to maintain trust. And that's what I mean as it relates to the annuity being the relationship, not the search.
So when you talk about relationships, therefore, with your clients and some of your clients and some of the people that you actually hired go on to become clients, how long do these relationships typically last, and how many iterations do you get with follow-up business, so to speak?
It really depends client to client. So what I would say is there is the cycle, the sales cycle, if you will, of meeting with an institution, meeting with their senior leadership team, and having the opportunity to engage on your first search. It's interesting. I have a client onboarding right now that I built a relationship with over the last 9 years. We've never had an opportunity to work together until now. So the relationship takes time. And of course, there's only so many senior leaders on a team, and there has to be an event that creates a need to fill that role, whether you're top grading talent or you're backfilling for somebody that's left the organization. So the relationship building can take a long period of time. That said, as a firm, over 65% of the searches that we work on as firm-wide come from repeat clients. So the idea, again, of selling trust over a long period of time. And so when you think about your average senior leadership team, if you're including, we serve middle market businesses, so revenues for us that cap out at around $1 billion. Your average senior team has no more than 20 people where you'd leverage a firm like ours to address such a hire. And so, again, a good client, if you will, meaning one that hires us frequently, may hire us once a year, twice at max. So again, to answer your question more directly, more than half of our clients are the clients that we've worked with before. I've got some that I've worked with over the last 10 years, and we've filled upwards of 15 searches, and others that come back every handful of years. So really, I think it is dependent on the marketplace. Given that I work in the financial services sector, it's a mature industry. What I mean by that is we do have a number of people in the senior leadership teams that are nearing retirement age. And with so many people ultimately moving on to the next phase in their life, moving on to retirement, we've seen a big uptick in our activity. So we have seen that over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and I foresee that going forward to the next 5 years as we have more and more baby boomers deciding to retire.
So you are a lawyer by training. Now you're dealing with financial services. Tell us about that transition and how much you had to learn on the job.
I loved law school. And I know I'm taking you back a little further than the practice of law. I loved law school. It was an incredible time in my life because I was surrounded by such intellectual horsepower. And so many people treated law school like it was the start of their career versus an extension of school, which I really appreciated. And then I moved on to the practice of law. And I joined a large law firm based in Los Angeles, and I became a corporate finance lawyer. And I'd always wanted to do transactional work, but I didn't realize that being a corporate finance lawyer would actually set the stage for the balance of my career. And so I spent 7 years representing predominantly financial institutions, lending money to businesses and helping those institutions grow. And so I learned a lot in the seat. I learned that being a practicing lawyer wasn't the ideal career for me. Not to say that it's not a great career, it just wasn't right for me because it leveraged a skill set which I didn't have. And the skill set that I did have, it didn't leverage to the extent that I would have hoped for. And really that was the depth of client interaction that I was seeking. And so when I left the practice of law, I had a lot of people ask me, so you quit law? And I thought, not necessarily. You know, you move to recruiting and people think, well, it's such a big transition. And I would argue the transition actually wasn't that big at all. I provided a consultative service as a lawyer, and I provided those services to financial institutions. Today, I provide a high-end consultative service to financial institutions still. The difference really is the work product. Instead of driving deal documentation, now we're placing executives. So the transition really wasn't all that big. And when I think about the components that I take from the practice of law to what I do today, I don't assess statutes and look at case law. I don't look at cross-referencing clauses between intercreditor agreements and term sheets. I don't do that any longer. But what I learned so much as a lawyer was client service, customer service. And then additionally, how to effectively communicate both in the written form and in the verbal form. And I think that those are the greatest gifts that I got from my time as a practicing lawyer that I still use very much to this day.
And what inspired you to make that switch?
Inspire might not be the right word. For me, the experience was that I was in a career that didn't give me energy. And so I didn't love practicing law. And I moved from a big global firm and then ended at a boutique firm. And so I tried to see the different varieties and the connection to the client. And even at the boutique firm where I had the closest connection on a personal level to my clients, I still found that I didn't love the work. And so I recognized that I needed to make a transition for my own happiness, my own fulfillment within my career. So whether you call that inspiration, I think it was really more a realization as to who I was, what my strengths were, and how I can apply them best.
And how many people are there like you in senior management recruiting with a law background that you've come across?
Oh, with a law background, I couldn't give you a finite answer. At our firm, I'm the only person here. Yeah, that's true. We had one other former attorney that was at the firm for a period of time. I'm the only person here with the law background, but I know that from the competitive landscape, you will find a number of people in retained executive search, which is the segment of recruiting in which our firm operates. You'll find a number of people that have different degrees. And so you'll see JDs, you'll see MBAs, you'll see MDs. So a variety of people that have used different educational backgrounds and pedigrees to then apply it ultimately to the business of executive search. And so again, typically within executive search, you are placing people into an industry that you are deeply familiar with. And so for me, having been a corporate finance banker, attorney, working with corporate finance institutions and placing people in feels really comfortable to me. Where people with the doctor background, for example, will do a lot in life sciences or healthcare. So you will see people with differing backgrounds that find themselves into the business of executive search.
So would you say that the analogy of being a matchmaker is an accurate one? And if it is, you think about being a matchmaker, you really have to know both sides really well and to see if that romance can happen and the fit is right. How do you make that assessment and how do you find that fit?
I mean, you've said it completely. You hire for fit, and you can always teach the rest. And so the fit component is extremely critical. And to your point, it's a two-way relationship. You drew the anecdote of a marriage, and we talk about that. You know, we're not setting our clients up to go on a date. We're setting them up to be married. And the idea being, it is our job to spend as much time with our client building our relationship up front, called the due diligence phase, to truly understand the organization and the people within it. Because in the end, an organization really is simply a makeup of all the people that run that institution. And they are simply people who have their own interests and life challenges on the outside. And so we seek to really understand the organization and the people within it. And we do that by spending as much time with them as they will give us. And so we will spend time inside or on site in their offices, talking across the spectrum of the critical stakeholders in any given hire. So that's going to be the executive leadership team, board members, and any specific direct reports. Really seeking to get to know them, taking them off campus, if you will. So let's get out from being within their offices. Let's go break bread. And seeing people outside the office, oftentimes you get a better visibility to the person beyond simply their professional profile. And then once we have the determination as to who our client is, and we know exactly what we're looking to fill, we then go to the marketplace and seek to cross-reference that with the candidates that we meet. And so candidates for us run through multiple rounds of assessment within our firm before they're ever introduced to our client. So it's typically 3 rounds of interviews with us. And I've got a team of people that we all work together on these financial services searches. And you will typically have a team of 3 or 4 that will interview the candidates. And the diversity in the interview slate is really critical because my teammates are different people with different backgrounds. And what that does is it allows us to each interview the candidates individually and then have the ability to triangulate to ensure that we felt that there was consistency in who was presented to us and what we heard. And then it's about ongoing dialogue. Clients and their interests and their understanding of the marketplace will change as they see more and more candidates. And so for us, it's the ability to course correct along the way by continuing that relationship throughout the entirety of a search process and doing the same with our candidates to ensure that they remain engaged. Because at this level of recruiting, any movement of a candidate, this is not just a job change, it's a life change. And so we're looking for buy-in not only from our candidate, but the entire supporting cast. And it's their family that may be involved in a long distance relocation and what that may mean. And so again, multiple touch points with candidates throughout the entirety of the process, both formal and informal, are critical for us to make that determination of the two-way fit.
And what's the timeline typically like from the time that you first step through the doors with your client to the time that the successful candidate steps through the doors with your client?
Yeah, you know what I'll tell you is that answers it can be tough to put an exact fingerprint on. And the reason is that I'll tell you is from the moment we go to market to the moment that an offer is accepted. Because post-acceptance, the start date can be pushed out for a whole host of reasons. Somebody took vacation, there's gardening leave, there's notice periods, but it's typically a 90-day process from the moment that we have the ability to get out to the marketplace as an evangelist on behalf of our client to run candidates through our process. We'll typically identify about 125 people to ultimately submit to the client 5 to 6 that we believe are ideal, both culturally and technically. And that offer is typically accepted right around the 90-day mark. We've had some searches that have closed in 45. We've had others that have had birthdays. But if you think on average, that's what you're looking about 3 months to complete an executive level hire.
And in terms of how you charge folks, is it by project? Do you do it by the hour like you do in law firms? Do you do milestones? How does it typically work in the recruiting industry?
Yeah, I will tell you, when I transitioned from law, billing my time in 6-minute increments, it took me a while to not hang up on a phone call and then have to write down my billing. And I will tell you, it's incredibly liberating. So our fee is structured based, on a per engagement basis, and it is a percentage of the first year cash compensation of a candidate. So if you think about that, that's base and bonus. We don't take into consideration any equity. It's simply to perspective. And so first year base and bonus, we will take 1/3 of that as our fee. And that 1/3 is then broken up into 3 payments, which are effectively progress payments. We get 1/3 as a retainer, 1/3 once the client has interviewed 3 candidates, and then 1/3 when a candidate has accepted the role. But again, it's not a perfect science. We've got a year-long guarantee. So if ultimately the person that we've hired for the role isn't the right person, or even if they were, but ultimately had to move back to care for an ailing parent, whatever it may be, we'll jump right back in and do the search all over again.
And so the better deal they get, the better deal you get.
Yeah, it's interesting. You'll have clients think that, well, you're pushing for a higher compensation. The reality is, but I would take a lower paid candidate and a happier client all day long. So yeah, there is a direct correlation between the compensation and our ultimate fee. And every once in a while, a client will ask us that, but I will tell you again, I'd rather, again, take the lower price candidate, happy client, because they come back again and again. Back to the annuity, right, is the relationship component, not the single revenue generator.
And you talk about searches gone wrong for whatever reason. So you find the right person, they love the person for whatever family reason or something else, they can't do it. You're going to start the search again. What happens then? Do you still get paid something and then you get paid again after you find the second person?
My fault for not being more clear when I explained it. So we've already been paid our fee because the candidate has been placed. Because we have the year guarantee, we start all over again at no additional fee. So we've already been paid at that point. Again, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We go back to the search and we do it all over again at no additional cost. Now, the reason there's that year timeline is that candidate filter, the candidates we've identified, will go stale after about a year. But within that period, oftentimes you can still go back to that candidate slate and re-engage them. And that's why we're able to jump back in. It's still efficient for us, efficient for the clients that have had the opportunity to assess whether or not they made the right hire.
I see. It must happen rarely enough because you still have your overheads to pay, and you might not be getting paid, but you need to still pay, folks that provide you with your electricity and your housing and salaries and so on.
Yeah, I've been doing this 13 years and it's happened 4 times. So it does happen from time to time. It's not to say that it doesn't. It's relatively rare.
A good batting average.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
So let's talk about Rod McDermott. He, in an interview, mentioned we don't find people jobs, we find jobs people. What does that mean to you?
So effectively, it's this. There's this misconception within the world of recruiting that we help people find jobs. And it's always tough when a friend introduces you to someone who's looking for a job. Can you help me find my next opportunity? And we can certainly play a role in helping people network because we are well connected by virtue of the job. But really for us, it is institutions that have very specific critical needs on their senior team, and then we go find the people. And we are not looking for people that are looking for their next opportunity. We are looking specifically for what our client has asked us to go find. And so if you think about it, it is rare that we're going to bring a candidate that is actively looking for their next opportunity. Most of these are passive candidates, gainfully employed, and then they get our phone call. And so the idea is that we're going after passive candidates, gainfully employed, educating them about an opportunity that we think could be accretive to them, to their career.
So they may not even realize they want a job.
Oftentimes that's the case.
That's counterintuitive, though. Why wouldn't the active candidates be a first choice? Because they've identified themselves to say, yes, we're willing to talk, we might even be willing to move. Wouldn't they be the lower hanging fruits?
Yeah, they'd be the lower hanging fruit, but and every now and again, you will have the active candidate who is perfect for the role. But again, it's not looking for the person who's put their resume up online. It's looking for the exact person you're looking for, whether their resume is online or not.
And then you need to court them.
You bet. Yeah.
How easy is it to convince somebody that might not even realize they want to move?
Well, for one, I mean, we put together an active outreach campaign in order to engage with candidates, and it's done over email, LinkedIn, phone outreach, because each of our practices, and you'll see this at McDermott and Bull, but you see this at our competitors, typically they are industry-specific practices. So the focus for me, financial institutions, say, for example, commercial banks. I do a lot of work with commercial banks. When I run a CFO search for a commercial bank, I'm building relationships with CFOs all across the spectrum. And so by the time I run the next one, we have a number of existing relationships. And when I talk about the relationship component for me being so critical, banking as an example, I attend I'm California-based, every California Bankers Association annual conference I'm at, investing in the relationships. We do the same thing in Texas. We do the same thing in Washington, and we seek to really build these relationships. It's called active pipelining. I mean, we're building a pipeline of candidates that we may need to call on whenever a future client has a need. And so when that need arises, when I call Daryl, for example, Daryl says, "Hey, Brandon, thanks for the call." Say, "Daryl, I've got one for you that might be ideal." And so that's really the criticality, again, of investing in that long-term relationship and how it is that we do it.
So going back to Rod, so Rod's a co-founder of the firm. You're the president. How does the relationship work between somebody that's founded the firm, somebody that is running the firm?
Yeah, it's a question that we give a lot of thought to, and that he and I talk about really openly. So, but by way of quick background, Rod McDermott's founder of the institution and built something really darn special. And McDermott and Bull is a place that gave me the opportunity to change my life. As you know, I shared my legal career wasn't the one that filled my cup, and I was looking to do something different, and executive search was exactly that. And so at a period of time, I then decided I wanted to invest in the business proactively and take a stake in the institution. And now I run a business alongside a CEO that wants to empower his people to continue to grow and develop. He wants that for me, which is fantastic. I also want to make sure that I'm really deferential to the individual that gave me the chance to change my life and build this institution. So what I would tell you, how is it that we do it? There's a lot of divide and conquer. And it's not just the two of us. We've got a tremendous team, really strong chief operating officer, head of marketing, head of finance. And so we've got an entire senior leadership team, really collaborative organization, where again, we seek to who has a strength in this one area, and we'll let them take the lead on that. Again, as I mentioned, the relationship, my deference to Rod, it really stems from a deep friendship. We got a close friendship and a really close relationship. And so the ability for open communication allows us to run really seamlessly. And it's not to say that we're both perfect all the time, but within our firm, we've got a very specific way of how we communicate with one another. So if something happens in a meeting, we have the ability to request from the other person to have what's called a clearing conversation. And so I might say, Daryl, I'd like to have a clearing conversation with you. Are you in a position to have it? And you might say, yeah, Brandon, right now is not the time. You might be feeling really under stress. So I don't want to just lay it on you until you're ready to have that sort of dialogue with me. When you are, we'll schedule a time and I'll share with you, Daryl, you did something in the meeting the other day and it left me feeling a certain way. And your job is to listen, seek first to understand where's Brandon coming from? And then my job is to do the same with you. So then ultimately we can work through it. And so that's a cadence that we leverage here at McDermott and Bull, which has been really helpful for us to address any confrontation. And it's been really seamless and really easy. And so we engage in that practice often.
Sounds like a good tip for marriage harmony too.
Yeah, I would tell you, it certainly would be. Yeah, and it's been a good. You realize with any level of communication, know your audience and try to understand where they're coming from. Yeah, I think it's a good tip for any interpersonal relationship.
So when you're hiring outside and hiring inside, do you use a different protocol? Are you looking for different things?
Yeah, as I had shared when we spoke earlier, the idea is that as you know, we are hired as a captive agency to recruit on behalf of our clients. So we should be pretty darn good at recruiting. This is what we do, and yet at times we can be our own worst client. But to answer your question directly, no, the process is the same. Right? Seek to really understand our client. And in this instance, if you're asking how do we hire for ourselves, it's seeking to understand who we are and where we want to go. Do we have the ability to address today's issues and tomorrow's? And then what are the core competencies that we need in this specific role? And then, of course, what's the culture fit? Now, it's a lot easier for us on culture. When I dig into a client whose four walls I don't work within, that can be a little bit more difficult. 13 years here at McDermott Bull, I know our culture. I've got a pretty good idea as to who fits in here. But as the firm gets larger and we seek to scale, the profile that was great when I joined is different. And so it's really asking ourselves those honest questions. And then trying to go out there again, have multiple touch points with every candidate. It's not just me as the sole interviewer. It's an entire team of interviewers to make sure that we have the ability to cross-reference whether we believe the candidate has the right fit within our organization. And what's interesting, I said hire for fit, we teach you the competencies. As a firm, we have countless stories of people that were hired into role A and are still with the company today, but in role B, C, or D, because the idea is there's such a fit for McDermott and Bull. But potentially they hired them into the wrong role. They were miscast, or as they've gotten to understand the business better, they want to play a role different within the organization and something that we allow for.
So one of the interesting things I learned in preparing for this conversation is that there's this thing called renting interim executives. I think a lot of folks who are listening to this probably aren't familiar with it. So can you unpack that for us?
Sure. So we've got at McDermott and Bull, think of us as a three-legged stool. We've got three revenue generators. You have executive search, interim leadership, which is what you've asked about. Then we have a coaching business. And the idea is that, coaching executives, once they're placed, that's great. How do you ensure that they're onboarded and develop into the person that you hope you hired? And so on the interim side, this was started really coming out of the great financial crisis. So many people, executives, found themselves on the sidelines that have been laid off from jobs and were looking to keep themselves busy as they looked for their next full-time opportunity. We had so many relationships in the marketplace, we figured this would be a way for us to give back to the executive community that really is our lifeblood, because they are our clients, they are our candidates. And can we help place them on interim engagements to our clients who maybe didn't have the payroll space to hire somebody full-time, but still really needed the help? And so that was the genesis of the business. It sits here today. Business has grown tremendously. So what you have effectively is this: you have a client that has a need that is specific, it is typically a time-sensitive deliverable. They need to rent the Ferrari, but they don't want to buy it. And so we have a really elegant solution where we can take the same level of executives that we place on permanent roles and put them in on interim engagements. So those typically run 6 to 12 months and have a varying level of engagement. Sometimes it's 3 days a week, other times it's full-time. Really depends on the client's need, and they're billed simply on an hourly basis. Again, been a really elegant solution. What we're seeing right now, as the economy finds itself in this unique, precarious place, at least the job market does. We have clients that are less engaged on permanent level hires, but are still having the need to bring in the same level of expertise. So we've seen a big uptick in our interim business. So again, renting an executive level candidate on a short period of time. And those really fall into 2 buckets. Those are people that are looking for their next full-time opportunity, but are willing to take on part-time work in the interim, or people that have decided, I don't want to work full-time. I want to work on a project basis. They might work for 6 months, take a trip, come back, and then re-engage and do another project.
So let me ask you about one other thing about McDermott and Bull before we turn to current affairs.
Sure.
You have a private jet.
The
Cessna CJ2, and it's on YouTube if anybody wants to have a look at that, and Rod talking about it. But give us your take on why the firm decided it wanted to have one and how you use it.
Yeah, it's an absolute win. So I'll tell you this: Rod McDermott, our CEO, is a pilot and has got enough hours to fly for Delta. And so Rod had airplanes before McDermott Bull was ever around. As we sit here now, further iterations of the firm, it's pretty nice. So Rod owns a CJ2, which is an 8-passenger jet. And what I will tell you is it's incredible because, one, private air travel is fantastic. You don't have to go through TSA. So you've got that benefit of saving time. But really, it's the airplane's ability to get into non-commercial airports. So for example, we've got customers in Bend, Oregon, or Spokane, Washington, or up in Mendocino County up in Northern California. And so in order to get into some of those places, either if you're leaving from Orange County, where we're based, you have to take a connecting flight, or there's not a commercial airport there. And so we've got the ability at the drop of a hat to say, have a meeting in the morning and say, we can be there in the evening. That's been a pretty special thing, a great way to show our clients that we're investing in the relationship. For Rod, he gets to pair his business with his passion for aviation. And I'll add one thing to it. Rod and 2 other individuals at our firm who are also both pilots started, gosh, must have been 8 years ago, an aviation practice. So they specifically serve aviation-specific companies, ranging from jet makers to propeller companies to avionics businesses. And when these guys go in and talk about search, they actually know the product because they've flown it or flown behind it, which makes them insanely credible in the meeting. And they've built a really neat practice focused around a passion for flight, which is pretty neat.
So what's the most interesting place you've flown to?
The most interesting place that I've flown to, you know what? I wasn't on the flight, but I'll tell you about it anyway. So we had acquired an institution in Amsterdam as we were continuing our firm's growth. And so bought a firm out there, and Rod had always wanted to fly his plane to Europe. And at the time, he had a different airplane that didn't have the range that he has currently with the CJ2. And so they flew from, if I understand this correctly, Orange County. They flew up to Calgary, from Calgary to, I'll say it was like Labrador, from Labrador to Greenland, and then from Greenland into Ireland. And so ferried the plane over, ultimately landing in Amsterdam. So that was a pretty unique trip for the people that were able to go on it. I had signed up for it, but lo and behold, had a kid along the way. And so wasn't able to take off on that trip. But that seems to me to be the neatest place that anybody's flown to. And then for me, gosh, best place? So fortunate, lots of good places. You know, we've been all the way from, we flew out to a pad with this one. Best place I've flown to in that airplane last year, we flew into Happy Valley and we watched Penn State play Indiana and get the W. And we had a pretty neat opportunity to meet with the president of the university, go to the president's tailgate, and sit in the president's suite for a game. That was pretty darn special, and we did it on that airplane. So thanks to the airplane, thanks to Dickinson Law.
And a wonderful platform for that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about current affairs. AI, it affects everyone. How has it been affecting you guys?
There's a lot of chatter, and then there's also impact. So where are we seeing the greatest impact? For us, it's been all really positive. So when I think about the way that we've leveraged AI tools for us, we'll spend time doing an interview like this. And as you know, in your seat, it's really critical to be an active listener. So then you can engage by hearing what I just answered and then responding to my response and asking the next question. But we spend so much time scribbling down notes as fast as we can so we can then report back to our client, well, what did the candidate say about this or that? And so we found a way to leverage AI. What we can do is we leverage Zoom. Zoom has an AI summary tool. So what we'll do is we inform our candidate, we're going to be transcribing this. That will then turn into a summary, which we will leverage. And that then turns it into a summary of everything that took place on that Zoom meeting. But instead of me head down trying to take as many notes as possible, I can be actively engaged. So that's been critically helpful for us as it relates to how it is that we deliver our work product, which would be a summary on the candidate that we've interviewed, making sure that nothing is lost to bad notes or failure to input it into our applicant tracking system. So that's been a huge win for us. Additionally, as I think about research, so when we walk into a new client or even an existing client, we need to understand a snapshot of the organization in its current state. We'll be able to then leverage AI to pull various components of what we need to get an understanding of an organization. That's been really helpful for us. There's a firm that we compete against that's private equity backed. I've never actually seen this in play, but so they say. They've got an AI model where we're having a conversation like this, and you don't know it, but on my end, it's prompting me to ask specific questions. As I ask them and you answer, it's grading your answer and then giving me the next question to ask iteratively as we go through the process. Really interesting technology. Again, I haven't had the chance to see it, but there's a little bit of buzz about it on the street as to whether or not that turns into something. It's tough. You can leverage AI, in my opinion, because it can help with the voluminous amounts of data that we all take in, regardless of business. But you hope not to take the subjective component out of it, because again, I sell trust. I sell the idea that me and my team will be making this assessment of an individual, and you hope that you don't take the subjective component out of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting tool for law professors too. Think about all the grading we could save if every exam were an oral exam and the algorithm just graded it.
And for law exams especially, you think, right? Because you've got rule application conclusion, you've got the different components of any specific topic, and then the ability to really, do we have the buzzwords? But again, what it does is it takes the subjective component of assessing, like where was the student in that instance coming from? Why did they choose that argument or that outcome? So, but it certainly would be helpful, no question.
Right. So let's talk about non-competes. Hot off the press. Are you concerned about how it's going to affect your business?
No, I think it's so. State of California non-competes are unenforceable, which is great. And we as a firm, I even think about it in our industry, many of our competitors will have their managing directors, who are the people that are client-facing, sign non-competes. And one as a firm, we simply don't believe in it, because what it does is it, like to the core, it stifles people's livelihood. And that just doesn't feel right to us. And again, state of California, they haven't been enforceable, so it's something that we're keenly aware of. In my opinion, so then of course you've got the FTC that comes down with this. It's going through the court system as we speak. So the question is does this ultimately get applied nationwide? Right now it's not, but you have many states that are adopting this from a state level standpoint. But you've got states like New York that they're still enforceable. And so ultimately, I think it's a good thing. I think it stifles innovation, it stifles career growth, and it stifles compensation growth. So on the whole, I actually think it's a really good thing for us. No, it actually makes our life a little bit easier. From time to time, we'll go to place a candidate who will have a non-compete, and you've got a client that's unwilling to engage in the likely legal battle that will ensue if they hire that person, or the opportunity cost to having that person, but not having the ability to engage in their area of expertise because of the non-compete. So again, all in all, I think it's a really positive thing.
And it's interesting because the poster child for non-competes, of course, is the tech industry, also based in California. And it sounds like with the financial services sector, you guys have progressed long ahead, long before. And being in California, you're used to almost as a norm, not having non-competes. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about DEI now. Have we gone too far, too fast, too soon? And are you seeing where you are a backlash on DEI hires?
So too far, too fast? No. Am I seeing a backlash? No. But we're seeing a shift. And so it went from being a buzzword, a buzz phrase, if you will, to then being a must-have for organizations. They moved quickly to hire people that could address the topic of DEI. We're running ahead of DEI search as we speak. I think what's happened is not necessarily backlash on DEI initiatives. What's happened is that they were introduced, they were all the rage, and now they've just fallen flat. And so as a result, I think you have really good intentions, but I don't know if the impact is ultimately going to be what everybody would have hoped. Because I see, aside from the one DEI search that we have right now, we had a handful going 2 and 3 years ago, and we have seen almost none come up since that point. Now, it's not to say that institutions aren't continuing to push DEI initiatives. I think they are, but I just don't think that they are doing it as publicly, as loudly as they were doing before, because companies felt this need to be politically to be very outward facing with what they were doing, because they felt that they had to react to the market. And now I think people are doing it. They're not doing it as loudly, but they're doing it because they recognize it's the right thing to do. And so, also driving growth in institutions is they're having a more diverse workforce.
So are we going back to the way things used to be, or are we in a new normal?
No, we're not. I wouldn't call it a new normal, because I don't think that there has been this. There was a groundswell of activity. I think there is now, because of that, you have awareness that was never had before, and you've had lots and lots of really smart people opine on the topic. So yes, it's a new normal, but again, I don't think the shift has been so huge that it's going to feel tectonic in terms of how businesses operate going forward.
So thinking more broadly international now, you alluded to that by saying that you had a hire that was in Amsterdam. How much of your market is international in terms of international recruitment and international placement? And how much of it is local?
So as a firm, we operate throughout the US. We've got operations in Canada, and then we have operations in Amsterdam. And so when I think about it, 20% of our business is run outside of the US. But to take it a step further, if this is the question you're asking, how many candidates are we relocating internationally for roles? Again, where we operate, think middle market, so revenues of a few $100 million to $1 billion. Every once in a while, we will have an international hire, but it's pretty rare. You're still finding that our Canadian business is placing Canadians. Now, our European business is moving people within Europe, but effectively think of that as the United States of Europe, because the borders are seemingly easier to cross from a corporate standpoint. So we're not doing a lot of that. We will have an international client. So right now we're working with a European investment bank with US operations, and we will help the US team put likely an American into a role in the US. So we're seeing more of that. but we aren't seeing at our scale moving people internationally. My guess is at the Fortune 500 level, you will see more of that transnational border crossing for executive level hires.
I find that interesting because you think about financial services, it's probably as fungible as you can get for international talent. And yet what you seem to be suggesting is that there is a glass ceiling or glass box where each country is essentially looking at their own nationals for those positions. Why do you think that is?
I don't think it's that they're looking at their own nationals for their own roles. I think it's that each market has their specific nuances. And so if you're an investment bank and you're doing US clean tech, you're likely recruiting somebody that's operating in the US clean tech sector. Now, could you bring somebody that was doing clean tech work from Europe to run the role in the US? You could, but I think if you're really trying to make a mark, you're going to pull somebody that's doing it here that has existing relationships. Now, if that person happened to be a foreign national, but operating in the US already, I don't think anybody would bat an eyelash about hiring the foreign national over the American. I just think it's who understands the nuance of any specific market, whether that's an industry coverage area or a unique geography. Think about commercial banking, for example, credit underwriting policies, even from county to county throughout the state of California are drastically different. And so you want somebody that knows that one county because somebody 2 counties away won't understand the differences in that marketplace. So I think that's the bigger driver than it is about where they come from.
Okay. I want to also save time to talk about your alma mater, since we are doing this as part of Penn State Dickinson Law's profile study series. So how did you pick the law school? What was your experience like in the law school? And then, so you're serving the law school right now as a trusted advisor. How's that going?
So 3 of the best years of my life. I loved my time at Penn State Dickinson. I really did. So how did I choose it? Southern California guy, born and raised. I went to USC. I didn't even plan on going. My dad's a lawyer. My grandfather's a lawyer. Said I'd never become a lawyer, and then lo and behold, I decided to do that. Specifically for me, I wanted to become a sports agent. And at the time, Jeff Scott was teaching at Dickinson. And Jeff had written a book about transitioning from the NC2A to the NFL. And so for one, it had a sports law program that was really enticing to me. 2, I had a big West Coast university represented. I liked the idea of the optics, admittedly, of a big East Coast institution represented. I thought that I would end up back on the West Coast. Everybody knows Penn State. It was a brand name that I knew that people would recognize. And then lo and behold, I go and I visit Penn State for the first time, and we're in Carlisle. And I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and all of a sudden I've got only 3 stoplights and a totally different experience. And yet it was everything that I could have hoped for. So that was why I chose it. Again, it was sports law. I liked the Penn State brand imaging back here on the West Coast. I had also studied abroad in college and spent time in England and absolutely loved the experience. Penn State had an international law program, again in London, and it was going to give me the opportunity to go double down and do that again, which I did.
So some of your favorite memories from law school?
Favorite memories from law school. Okay. I mean, two really stick out. And so one is Harvey Feldman, who was our associate dean at the time, who has since passed, but an incredible guy, a great professor, and he became a really good friend. And so we had this has nothing to do with the study of law at all, but we had a Penn State softball team that would travel down to the University of Virginia for this annual tournament. And I remember we fielded 2 teams my first year. And we all went down in buses, and I don't even remember the outcome of the tournament, but I remember just thinking how fun that was. That here was this Southern California kid in Pennsylvania, driving to Virginia, doing something really fun while I was in the process of pursuing my graduate degree. And the fact that you could still mix in some balance, some fun with a serious commitment to academia. So that was really fun. And then the second really was my entire experience in London. We went with a great group. We studied international law. And it was so interesting as we studied the English common law system, and obviously it's what ours is based off of, to see that comparative landscape in a globalizing world while living abroad was just incredible. So formative experience for me. I met incredible people along the way. I think about getting married, and a handful of my My groomsmen were folks that I went to law school with. That was really special. And then still to this day, I've got the opportunity to come back and guest lecture at the school. And anytime I'm invited, I will be there because this place holds a special place in my heart.
And you talk about leadership. So what do you focus on when you talk about leadership?
You know, it's interesting. As I think about the last few years, it's been less about leadership as I talk to the law school, and the focus has been about career management. And so what I talk to a lot of people about, and I'll get to the leadership component here in a moment, but when I talk about career management and really career assessment, people, if they've decided to go to law school, believe in some sense that law will be a part of their future. Now you're finding it's become a broader degree and more people are getting it as a great foundation to do other things, but typically they're going to law school to become lawyers. And so I will talk about a non-law path in the professional world. And really, it's not about, and I've got a unique vantage point as somebody who practiced, who left the practice and is now in the business of jobs. And I talk a lot about finding jobs that align with your innate skill set. And if that aligns with being a lawyer, then fantastic, you'd be great at it. But ultimately, if you can find a career that aligns with your innate skill set, it will be really easy to be successful. And then to get so much joy from your work. And so really, I think a lot about that for people. You know, how can you find something that aligns with your innate skill set, which I think is so important. And at times people fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy. Well, I've already put X amount of time into this. I owe it to myself to go practice law. And what I would say is perhaps you do, but perhaps there's another opportunity out there for you that leverages your skill set better. As it relates to leadership, the piece that I espouse all the time is the criticality of your relationship building skills. I see all the time at the senior leadership level, those who elevate to the top are not always the most technically competent, but they are the people that are able to navigate their organization and their customer base the best. And so even if interpersonal communication isn't your strong suit because you consider yourself an introvert, there are still ways to communicate, build trust, build credibility with people, which I think is the most important thing. And I see it for the clients that we serve and the candidates that they ultimately hire. It's typically the people that they feel communicate the best, more so than those who are technically the best.
And that's both a great soundbite and a great kernel of wisdom.
Well, thank you.
My question as we close this out, work-life harmony, what does that look like for you?
Life harmony? Oh, you're serving me up a softball. So this is life according to Brandon. I'm a huge believer. So in life, again, life according to me, 3 buckets. You've got your professional life, your work life, you've got your family, and then you've got your me bucket. And you can't see it. Me bucket, family, and work bucket. The family and work bucket deserve your most attention. They should be priorities and time, because they are incredibly important and they fuel one another. But what people so often miss is the me bucket. And it's the importance in ensuring that you still have those things that make you you, so you don't lose your individuality. And so I talk about this a lot. My me bucket's my smallest, but I fill it up. And if I fill up the me bucket, it makes me better at home. I'm a better dad. I'm a better husband. It makes me better at the office. And I think about that symbiotic circle. So if I can fill up the me bucket and be great with my kids in the morning, kiss them off to school, head into the office with energy and enthusiasm, have a great day at work, and then bring that back home with my family, right? Then I've got that perfect sort of circular approach to positive energy. So biggest thing that, in my opinion, people miss as they get into their professional life, they lose that component of filling up that me bucket. Those few things that are just you. It's not your work. It may not be connected to your, you know, for me, I box and I mountain bike. 2 things my wife doesn't like to do. And so I do them. I've got a coach for each. I absolutely love it. I fill up that me bucket. And again, it makes me feel like I've got things that are uniquely me. And it makes me better in the other 2 facets of my life. So huge believer in balance.
Thank you. Lots to think about. Nice sound bites, good wisdom. And we are so proud that you are one of our alumni.
Oh, well, thank you, Daryl. I really appreciate you giving me the chance. I got to eat my hats off to you. You're a heck of an interviewer, because we went a lot of different directions and I wasn't sure where we were going to head. And you did it artfully. So bravo.
Thank you. And we'll be in touch. So thank you again for joining us on this episode of Profiles in Leadership.
Thanks. Take care.